for our family and make an impact in our communities as well. So what we're going to do tonight is we'll take a look at the presentation entitled Destination. So we're looking at key points in your financial journey that you may want to seriously consider. Many of you will find that you're death in the family, losing a job, all of those would qualify as emergencies, right? How about a sale at Costco or, pardon me? Car breaking down can be a major emergency. Water heater going out. Yes. Okay. So what wouldn't be an emergency? I'd suggest a sale at Costco is probably not an emergency. A lot of people think that is an emergency, or cannot beat price on a big widescreen TV. It's an emergency. You know, you go liquidate what you've got, you empty the piggy bank, you scrape, and that's not an emergency. Emergency fund is to be there for emergencies. So why not just use a credit card? Okay, the car breaks down, or the hot water heater. Isn't it a lot easier to reach for the plastic and take care of it? Okay, it may not fit your budget, and for many people, budget is a bad word, but yes, your budget or your financial plan, and why might it not fit? What could make it where a credit card might not be the best thing to turn to? Welcome. And we have pens if you need them. Do you need a pen? Okay, excellent. Thank you. Okay, what's the problem with using a credit card? The problem with using a credit card is it may well be that it creates a secondary emergency, right? It takes care of the immediate emergency, but it may either move you into one or move you deeper into an existing emergency. And so you really want to be able to fund those simple things. It's not simple when your car breaks down, but you want to be able to fund those from an emergency fund. So destination number one is save $1,000 for emergencies. I kind of like to think of it like canoeing. How many of you enjoy canoeing? We've got some nice water around here. We don't get out nearly as much as we'd like to, but we've got a couple canoes. And if you look at a canoe, the distance between there and the water is called freeboard. Now, how little freeboard can you have in canoe? Okay, you're suggesting an inch. You guys feel comfortable with an inch? Okay, and I think you put your finger on financially the same thing. If I am living my life with that much margin or freeboard, anything is going to rock, if not swamp, my boat, right? Some years ago, quite a few years ago, we went out with some friends on Lake Roosevelt, not that far from here. And we had a couple small kids and a big dog between two canoes. And the big dog and the kids were in my canoe along with their father. And everything that floated by, the dog lunged for, big dog, and the kids wanted to know what he lunged for. So all three would lunge for one side. And we had so much camping gear in there, we had about that much between us and the water of Lake Roosevelt. Unfortunately, plenty of people are doing finances the same way. You can canoe with that much freeboard if the water is glass, right? The problem is when financial waves or storms hit. And there's why we are looking at the emergency fund. So number two is to pay off credit cards. So how would you go about paying off your credit cards? What approach would you take? Okay? Okay, so the best approach is to pay it off a month, no interest. It's a tool for you, but not a crutch, not a problem. That's the ideal way. But what if you are much more, how should I say it? I once went for, we were buying something big and they wanted to know that kind of debt. And I said we didn't have any. And the person said, that's un-American. Well, in that one respect, I'm happy to be un-American. But what if you are the more typical American and you have at least a nominal amount of debt? Why would destination 2 be paying off your credit cards? Well, that's going ahead and using something that, some money that you don't have to spend. So how would you pay it off? What would be, got a couple options. Any ideas? One is, where would you start? Put it that way. Where would you start? Okay, so we've got two camps here. And each of your methods fit depending on the situation. Here's the deal. Who said, a couple of you said, start with the smallest balance first. Okay? Where that can be really helpful is if you need those celebration points. You need those successes along the way. There's lots of people that I encourage, go with the smallest debt first, because maybe in 2 or 3 months you're going to have a celebration, and you can take all the money that you put on that and put it on the next smallest one, right? So you can have these celebration points. It feels like you're getting somewhere. It's no fun to try to do something for 18 months before there's any major success, right? So for many people, that works the best. Just take the smallest one, take the amount that you saved when it's paid off, put it on the next one, and it just starts picking up momentum. However, if you're a driven person, maybe you come from good German stock, I don't know, you might line them up, and it could be really wise to line them up by interest and hit the one that's hitting you the worst, the 17 or 18 or 21%er, and knock it off first, because you're going to have a serious savings. Now, of course, the problem with that is it may be a year and a half before you see the success. So you really have to know yourself, or who you're counseling, who you're sharing with, and decide which one is best. And actually, there's a third method. Go ahead. Okay? And what's the advantage there? Low interest rate. Yeah. What could be a disadvantage? That is the disadvantage, is it can relieve the pressure that started fixing the problem, because all of a sudden, you're right. I mean, things drop, it's manageable, and now that it's manageable, Costco has another emergency. And I need to, so the problem, my concern when I visit with anybody who's looking at debt consolidation is just make sure you fix the problem, not just band-aid the ouch that's causing you to be willing to address it. So, what you've said is a great way to tackle it. We've just got to make sure that the behavior has changed. Otherwise, you'll be deeper in debt. You'll have one big debt, and then you'll start piling on the big stuff. So, that's where the real answer is it depends. I mean, it's so situational based. A third approach is just to say which one's causing you the most stress. Sometimes certain debts are causing you a lot of stress because maybe you borrowed from a friend or relative. Doesn't matter the interest rate. You want to get that cleared up, right? You're just saying, you know, I don't even like seeing them. It reminds me that I'm delinquent on my debt. I mean, this is real. And so in that case, you might start with the one that is causing some stress in your life. So those are a couple different ways. There is no right answer. It needs to be the one that fits you or me and my situation. And then what should you do with the credit cards after paying them off? Again, it depends, right? You may use them as a tool. I use them as a tool. I have never paid a penny of interest on them, but I use them quite a bit. I pay a ton of my bills on it right now, and at the end of the year, I get a little thank you in the form of a couple $100. You know, I can work with that. But if I ever didn't, I'd cut them up, I'd freeze them, I'd do whatever. I mean, so it needs to fit the situation. If there's a problem, probably need to cut them up and go for a couple years to establish good habits. Yes?
Sorry. Yeah, the reason we use credit cards is because if we use a debit card, which we have both, the debit card, if you make a mistake or somebody somehow gets on it, it's less likely that you'll get your money back. But on the credit card, the credit company is pretty well watching what's going on, and they say, "Woo, this is an unusual thing," and they've saved us a couple times like that because of that, and that's the reason we use the credit card.
Yeah. I think, you know, the message is the credit card is not the problem, but it can certainly be a tool to rapidly put me in trouble. That capability exists. So that's where we try to say, be careful. Not don't use, but be careful. And then, as part of destination number 2, increase emergency fund to 1 month's living expenses. So $1,000 was not the ultimate target. We're saying let's incrementally bring it up. First, you realize there's a lot of people who, if an emergency of $400 or more, they couldn't deal with it. If something hit them, $400 or more, they could not deal with it without turning to credit. That's why we went to $1,000, but we didn't put everything there. Next, we go to paying off credit cards, and at the same time, trying to increase that buffer. Using the canoe analogy, we're increasing our freeboard or our margin. Okay, and where are the options for putting savings, your emergency savings? Where would you put them? Okay, money market. Money market wouldn't be a bad thing. Yeah, money market could work. Why wouldn't I go out and get some Microsoft stock? I mean, it's doing well, and this money's just sitting here. Okay, it needs to be liquid, right? It needs to be something I can put my hands on right away, and I might be able to put my hands on my Microsoft stock, but it might be down 17% from when I put it in an emergency. That's not what I need. So we need money that, you know, it's boring, it's just sitting there, it's available. Money market might be about as aggressive as you'd want to get with an emergency fund. Emergency fund is an emergency fund. It's to be there so you can grab it quick. So whatever you do, you want it to be available. Number 3 destination is to pay off all consumer debt. That would be auto, furniture, student loans, those type of things. So we've done the emergency fund, then we've gone to increasing it to, oh, you need one. We've increased our emergency fund to 2 months, working on our credit card debt. Now we pay off all consumer debt. And we increase emergency fund to 3 months living expenses. So here's a question for you. How much should you ideally have in your emergency fund? We started out with $1,000. That was to get us to at least be able to hit the small waves. What do you think is an ideal amount for an emergency fund? This is not a retirement. This is not investment. This is just an emergency fund. Okay, you'd say 6 months. Okay, anybody else? And this would be basic living expenses. So you could drop any of those things that are discretionary. You know, you wouldn't have to save enough for your eating out or whatever it is that you do. You know, if you're in a tough time, if you're in an emergency, you could stop the eating out, the recreation, that kind of thing. But 6 months is a figure that's often given. If a person has a really stable job in a very stable industry, 4 months, you know, might be on the lower end. 6 months. And obviously, if you're in a very volatile industry, I grew up in the logging area of North Idaho, and it was booming or bust. You know, when logging was running, everybody had new pickup trucks, that kind of stuff. And then when lumber prices went through the floor, everybody was pawning off or having their vehicles repossessed, etc. So it was this boom or bust. And so that would be an industry that's not real stable. Construction often is one. Right now, you just can't get contractors. So it's a boom cycle. But if you're in an industry that's just pretty flat and level, 4 months might work for you. But this is an ideal. Doesn't mean a person has to have it, but it's really a good ideal to shoot for. So if we were to turn back the clock, and it's hard to think how different things were just 6 years ago. But if you remember in 2014, it was hard to find a job. We don't think that way right now. And it's just a reminder that what's happening now is not forever. We tend to lock in on what the economy is or jobs or whatever. So back in 14, what was the average number of months spent looking for a new job? When you lost your job, looking for something reasonably equivalent, what would it be? So 7 or 8 months? You are so super close. 9 months. 3/4 of a year to find a similar job back in 2014. Is $1,000 going to cover that during that time? No way. That was the average. There were people who went longer. For everybody who went shorter, they went longer. And what was the percentage of households that couldn't live comfortably if the breadwinner lost a job for 3 months? Any guesses? What's the percentage? Still pretty sobering. 47% of those making under $100,000 a year, and about 1/3 of those making over $100,000 a year said we could not survive well for 3 months. And that was at a time when the job search on average was 9 months, 3 times what they said we could weather. So just a reminder, that's why we're doing the emergency fund. It gives that ability, no matter if the water's calm or the water's rough, we're prepared for it. Milestone number 4 is to begin saving for major purchases. So what might this be? What do you think the major purchases are? This is advice that this number 4, begin saving for major purchases. This is something you'll find from most financial general advice. This falls about in the middle. What are we thinking about here? Major purchases. Pardon me? Okay. Good guess. You're getting a little ahead of us. This is major, but not the most major. So good. You said vehicles. Vehicles would be one of them. Yes. Saving up for the car rather than putting the car on credit. Buying the car on a 5-year plan or a 6-7-year plan or whatever. It would be saving up. And maybe the first time a person saves up, they save up so that they can put down half. If they were financing the car every time, being able to put down half could really help knock down that interest. Or maybe they could save, you figure my car is going to last me about 7 years, so I ought to try to save 1/7 of the cost of the next one and be able to put that money down when needed. Other purchases, what would be some other big purchases other than the home? You're anticipating where we're going, but okay. That's a big, long, ongoing expense, isn't it? And usually not a lot of preparation made for them. They show up and you figure out how to pay for them. Yeah, you're looking at big home systems, furnace, some of your bigger appliances, which are getting expensive, etc. And so you just figure out what that appliance or car is going to cost and figure out how can I have it ready when the time comes. Also, at destination number 4, you're beginning to save for retirement. Okay? Now, why didn't you start saving for retirement before? Why is this so late in the journey? We've got 7 steps, just to give you an idea. When I say late in the journey, here's a little over halfway through before we're starting to save for retirement. If you're paying 12, 14, 17% interest, you are better to pay that off than to go out and make an investment, right? If you can pay it off and keep it off. So it's a progression. And you'll notice the first couple steps aren't necessarily going to take you forever, are they? Now, it may seem like forever when you're moving up to that $1,000 or the 2 months worth of savings. It may seem like it's forever, but those early ones go faster. Some of the later milestones go a little later. Now, where I would push retirement earlier would be is if you are working for an employer who has a match. You don't want to let that match go. That's often it's a 1 for 2. So for every dollar you put in, they're putting in 50 cents, or a 1 for 1 match. That's free money. You can't make that out in an investment. So you at least want to take advantage of any free money. But here, destination number 4, you'd begin taking those extra steps and saving for retirement. Also begin saving for children's college education. And the question would be, if you had to choose, which of these two would be more important? Saving for retirement or saving for your children's college education? Which one? Depends on how many kids you have. It's certainly going to make a difference. Typically, financial counselors will say number 2 is more important than number 3. Here's why. Most colleges, kids can get loans. You cannot get a loan for retirement unless you consider a reverse mortgage, and we could talk for a night about that. Retirement, nobody's going to be contributing for your retirement. That doesn't mean that we don't want to prepare for our kids and hopefully help them along, but if we can't, they can get a loan, and by living frugally afterwards, they can pay those off. But nobody is paying your retirement. So if you have to choose, and often we do, and it doesn't have to be a complete either or, but bias yourself toward the retirement if you have to bias one way or another. Kids can get a college education without parents seeing them through. And number 4, if you want to start a business, start saving now. So those are some of your destinations. This is kind of the middle point in your journey. And up to now, you can reach them pretty quickly if you're wanting to really stick to it. It'd be a couple years maybe. Okay, number 5, buy an affordable home. Right now, it certainly does. Those two things don't go together here, do they? A bit of an oxymoron to have an affordable home. It's crazy out there. It is ridiculous. And we, like most industries, are seeing the difficulty of bringing people in. It's hard to get somebody in. How do you touch this on a pastor's or teacher's salary or a treasurer? I mean, these treasurer who could be out in industry making 2.5 times as much with no difficulty, but they feel committed to God's work, but they need a house. It's challenging. And then the suggestion is begin prepaying the home mortgage. So take a look at how can I accelerate this and not make this a 30-year experience. Now, you can get a 15-year loan, and that can work. I really like, if interest rates are at all close, I like the 30 because I can always make it shorter by putting extra on. But if something comes up unexpected, I can always drop back to that lesser payment if needed. So I tend to discourage people, unless there's a big spread in interest, from going on the 15-year because it locks them into some some pretty aggressive payments. I'd rather pay aggressively, but with the fallback option of not doing that. Now, you mentioned Spokane prices. I'm going to throw some numbers up here. Don't laugh at me. Don't tell me I'm totally out of the realm of reality. Some of you are going to think the numbers are high, some low. I'm only illustrating a point, so please bear with me. You're house hunting. You expect to put 10% down, and you have a loan lined up for 30 years at 4.93% interest. Why did I choose that? It's today's interest. That's the average rate here in the U.S., and I believe that's even a bit more zeroed in on Washington. So that's the average cost of buying money right now, or borrowing money. So house number one is $350,000, and there's the payment that would be there. House number two is $425,000, and the total loan over 30 years for the $350,000 one, what you will pay in principal and interest is going to be $639,000. And for the other house, a little over $750,000. So that's what it's going to cost you if you let it run out for the 30 years. So a difference there in the two loans, almost 37. So now let's say you decide to buy the smaller house and you pay the amount as if you'd bought the larger house. Get the idea? So you say, yeah, we're going to go for the smaller, but we'll just pay as if we'd gotten the larger. So house number one is $350,000, the other is $425,000. You're going to go ahead and pay the $2,000 a month. You will have paid the house number one off in about 20 years with a total cost of $536,000, whereas the other one over 30 years was $775,000. Almost $240,000 difference. Now, again, not to get locked in on the house prices, but that's just the illustration of what interest can do for you and me. It can do it either way, right? Get it on a credit card and it's one of your worst enemies. Get it working for you here in reduction, or even when we talk about retirement in compounding, it can do amazing things. Interest plus time does great things. So now, by the way, I just had to drop this in. By the way, with the house purchase, if you had decided instead to invest the $359 per month difference, so you didn't pay off house number one more rapidly, if you did it at 10% for those 30 years in a traditional IRA, at the end of 30 years, you'd have a house and you'd have an investment of over $800,000. Serious. I ran the number 4 ways because I knew somebody's going to challenge me on it. It stacks up. Now, you may say, wait a minute, 10% isn't realistic. Who gets that on their investments? If you had invested for the last 30 years just in the broad S&P, Standard & Poor 500, index fund, nothing special, nothing managed, you just were in the index fund for 30 years, you'd have gotten more than 10%. So this isn't a number that's that far off. So it's just a reminder of what interest can do for us or against us. So anything you can do, just nudge your mortgage forward can be a great thing, or you can always throw it into, I said traditional IRA because I didn't want to deal with taxes right now. Have somebody say, wait a minute, but what about taxes? Well, if you're putting in a traditional IRA, it went in tax-free, it's growing tax-free, etc. So, but if you put it in a Roth IRA, by the way, you could pull it out if an emergency struck. You could pull out what you put in, leaving the interest, and you could do both. You could have a bit of an emergency fund, and you could also have an investment. It's not where I'd put my emergency fund, but you could have that little reserve in a Roth that you can pull out penalty-free. So just a little aside there. Begin investing wisely. And why don't we do this before? I mean, we could have used that investing to build our emergency fund, right? Or to pay off credit cards. You know, instead of paying off my credit card, I could go out. I talked to my, my brother-in-law's good friend who just made a killing in, Tesla or whatever. Why would we wait until step 5 on a 7-step journey to begin investing wisely? That's it. It's risk. There is no risk paying off a 17% credit card, right? It's the same as earning 17%. And yet you're going to have to take an awful lot of risk to earn 17%, but you aren't going to take any risk to pay off that credit card. So you really want to, here you've covered, if your investment goes bad, what's going to happen? Your house is solid, right? You've got a couple months worth of emergency fund there. You can handle it if something went bad. If the market went down, you wouldn't panic. You could just leave it in there. Then it would come back up. Markets go like this. So you'll notice that some of the big things that people want to jump into right away, buying a home, investing, making a killing, etc. You get the other things as a good foundation, and then none of these things are going to rock your boat. I mean, what happens if you get a home and you've got $600 in cash and something goes out? What's going to happen? It's going to start you in a cycle, right, that's going to be hard to dig out of. And unfortunately, right now, homes are going crazy. But where was it back in 2008, 2009? People were not only shedding homes, it was trashing their credit rating, which made it so they couldn't for 7 years buy another home, etc. We go through these cycles. You can't pile in fast enough, and then you can't leap out fast enough. And so by putting the 4 milestones before, we've built a foundation that means when we buy a home, yeah, there may be surprises, but they won't be devastating. And that's a big difference. It doesn't put the sudden stress on me that is reflected in my relationship with my spouse, right? Because now that we're tight on money, we start arguing about basic purchases that before would have been nothing. But, you spent, no, you spent, etc. And this sets us up with a nice, firm foundation. Number 6. So notice those first couple destinations. They went pretty fast, right? This one takes a while. It may take the 30 years. I kept moving from place to place, and I just not quite start over, but you've made progress, and then you have to go buy I was so excited the second home I was going to buy. I moved from Ephrata, Washington. That's where I bought my first home. Hard to think of. I mean, it makes me feel old to think that my house could be that cheap, but it was $68,000. And we bought it, and we had made pretty good progress on paying $68,000. Of course, we weren't making a ton of money either, but we got it pretty well. It was up there to where we could see striking distance within. We were 9 years in it, and so we thought, maybe we might hit the 15-year mark. So when we moved, we thought, wow, we're going to be able to get something we really like. I mean, we worked hard, we got here, etc. Well, we found out that we moved to a town where the prices were a whole lot more than there, and the best we could do was get in about the same entry-level home. But we keep chipping away at it. But, it may be 30 years. What you certainly don't want it to do is be something that's perpetual into retirement. I know too many people personally who are still paying off when they go into retirement. And usually our incomes drop in retirement. So we'd like to have our house paid off. But number 6, you want to see, it may be, a couple decades before you get to that milestone. That one doesn't come near as fast. Children's college education funded. And again, that doesn't mean, funded doesn't mean full parental ride, but it means that you'll be able to give them the kind of boost that can help them get the education that can't be taken away from them. I mean, talk about a legacy way better than money. You can't take an education away from a child. So if you can help them get that education, they may go a different direction, but they've got that degree there. So if you can help them. Confirm your estate plan is in order. And we'll be talking more about that on night 3. That'd be Wednesday. So we'll be talking more about your estate plan being in order. And notice, I would say that you make sure that it's in order. This is not when you make your estate plan. Your estate plan, when will you ever have anything more valuable than your kids? People say, I don't have anything. Well, part of your estate plan is making plans that say, hey, if by some small, tiny chance something happened to both of us, I only know in our conference, in the 50, 60 years that I know that goes back, I only know of one time that we've had a couple pass away, either 1, 2, or together. So it doesn't happen very often, but you certainly want to have good plans, and that's part of this. So you want to do it much earlier, but again, you come back to it and make sure it wasn't a once and done and that you never looked at it again. What are the key elements of a good estate plan? What are just the basic documents that are the building blocks of an estate plan? We all think of the will, right? Where we say, who gets what I have? What else? What are some of the other parts of an estate plan? It doesn't all happen when I pass away. Part of a good estate plan is saying, who's going to make decisions for me? Who's going to act on my behalf if I become incapacitated? I'm still alive. I haven't died. We're not talking, get rid of my stuff. We're not talking my executor, guardians, none of that. We're just talking what happens if something happens to me, and maybe it's a stroke, maybe it's an auto accident, maybe it's, increasing dementia, whatever it is. Who do I want making financial decisions for me while I'm still alive? Most people, it's their spouse. Spouse first, and then if they have older kids, they'll often pick kids or trusted friends or siblings. Who do I want making decisions for me medically? What kind of decisions can I lay out ahead of time in case I'm ever in a situation where I'm terminal? And I want to give some instructions on, how much or how little treatment I want if I know that ultimately, short of a miracle, nothing's going to change the course of my going downhill. So those are all, and here in Washington and a couple other states, but Washington especially, community property agreement, rapid transfer of assets to a surviving spouse without probate, some of those things. So those make up a good estate plan and something everybody should have. And what if you don't have a lot? Do you need an estate plan? If you've got kids, you do. And the lawyers will often use the example that what happens if you get hit by a UPS truck? You were poor, but your estate will be rich. So you need an estate plan because you never know what you'll have when you pass away. Most of us won't have a lot, but there are times when suddenly you are amazingly wealthy. Not the way we want to go out, but it does happen. Yes.
That happened in one of my previous churches where I was a pastor. This lady that had given her life in service to God, she was a teacher. She had a tragic accident, and the party that caused the accident gave a big payout. And because of her estate plan, she lived in pain for a while, and then she passed away. But because of that estate plan that she had written, a large portion came to the church, which the village church used to fund missions and start all kinds of projects. It was really kind of a testimony of her life. It was her last, act of stewardship.
Yes.
A blessing beyond her life to me. And she wasn't welcome.
Yes. So that's a perfect classic example of the fact that it's unlikely, but it's certainly possible that I could actually have much more in death than I had in life. We don't know. So we make an estate plan that says, here's what I want. And by the way, if you don't have an estate plan, nothing will ever reach God's work. If you don't have an estate plan, where's it going to go? It will go according to the state's plan. It won't go to the state, but every state has a plan, and all they're trying to do is say, what would a reasonable person want? Well, it's going to be my spouse, right? My kids. If I don't have either spouse or kids, it's going to be my siblings. It's thinking, who would I have natural affection for and want to care for if I can't do it with my money? So they have a flow chart. It's kind of like a reverse family tree. And every state has one, and they're pretty similar. Spouse and kids rank up there. 100% goes to them unless they don't exist. Then it goes to brothers. Then it goes to brothers, sisters. Then it goes to parents, and so forth. And that's where you hear about having a rich great uncle, right? It got so far out the tree that somebody inherits from somebody they never knew. But nowhere in that tree will there ever be God's work. Ever. I mean, the state's not going to mandate, well, you went to church for 40 years, you were passionate about the kids and Pathfinders and all that. No, it's going to go to family. So the only way to remember God's cause in your estate plan is to have one. It will never go there otherwise. And number 7, so this is our arrival point. Retirement is funded. So this is, for most people, going to come right up at retirement. That's pretty well where this milestone. So this is designed to stretch over your lifetime, at least up through retirement. And number 2, you are now free to be more generous with time and money. This, to me, is the goal of Christian financial stewardship. It's not to make me a wealthier Christian. It's not to make sure that I have less financial worries. Now, along the way, it may reduce stress in my home and things like that, but the whole goal is to be a giving Christian along the way. And as I have less credit card debt, as I pay off other debt, those are resources that can go into God's cause. I can make a difference now with sending that child to academy. I can help those Pathfinders go to a life-changing experience that I couldn't if I was servicing a lot of debt. Or if I had bought right up to my means in every area. I got the car that I could get with the biggest monthly payment that I could handle, and the house that I could barely make, etc. It looks good, but I don't make near the kingdom impact that I can as I try to be a good steward of what He's given me. Because He's given me, it's not that I pay Him off with 10% and the rest is mine to live as far as I can go. No, it's given to me to make a difference in those aspects of my local church, etc. So what happens if we get these out of order? I gave you 7 major steps. What happens if we, well, here they are. What happens if we mix these around? Okay, 7 will never happen. You're absolutely right. I'll keep talking about, well, when I have some money, I can retire. When I have some money, I can afford to be more generous, but not right now, not yet. Okay, good. So 7 will never happen. My train will never, or my ship will never come in, I guess, to port number 7. What else? What are some of the other implications if I mix these up? Okay, you could have a significant amount of stress, couldn't you? A lot of stress. Yes. Yeah. Now, is it possible to buy a house at number 2 and make it? You can, can't you? Just like canoeing on really glassy water. It's not saying your life will self-destruct if you get these out of order, but it is saying there could be some significant stress. It is saying you're increasing the likelihood of some catastrophic things happening. Now, if you mix up 1 or 2, you move it 1 position or 2 positions, not a big deal. But if you don't have $400 to your name and you buy a house, you will likely struggle for the better part of the 30 years with that. And it was an unnecessary struggle. And so this is a way of just laying that groundwork. And I wish we could somehow push that for our young people coming out of college, etc., and just talk about, hey, you can build a foundation here that will make your life not stress-free, but it'll sure reduce stress. You'll make it so much more rewarding because you'll be free to do the kinds of things you want to do. And you and I both know people who their hearts are good. They want to do more, but they can't. And this is trying to lay a foundation that says, how can we do this in a way that will get me to destination number 7? The retirement that is set up. And retirement's a blessing for God. And be able to do things, go on a mission trip, etc. So which step would you say is most difficult? If you were to just look across there, and it may be semi-personal. There's not a right or wrong answer. But as you look at those, what of the 7 steps might be the most difficult? Okay, you'd say 6. And why would you say that? It is a big dollar amount, isn't it? It's not something I can set my heart to, and no matter how hard I grit my teeth, that I can hit it in 2 years or 10 years. No. So yeah, that's a big one. Anybody else? That one's a tough one because it wants to keep coming back, doesn't it? It just feels like it naturally comes back. Good point. I mean, investing can feel like it's so far away, the rewards. I mean, you're not gaining anything right now, etc., and you know where you could use that money, right? You've got 3 places that you could spend that money, and to put it in investment, especially an investment that may go down. Right now, this 2022 hasn't been great. Right. And that is a pull for Christians anticipating the second coming, isn't it? How do I live being ready and giving generously now, and yet being ready also to support myself right on into retirement. I bet we may have some people here that never expected to retire. I didn't ever expect to get my driver's license. Wasn't because I was a bad driver. I just knew Christ was coming soon. As a little kid, I knew he was coming. And he is, but he didn't come on my timetable. So how to live in a way that makes a real difference while being responsible. So which one's the most rewarding? Which of these steps? That's a big one, isn't it? You know, and when you get into making a kingdom impact, there's a thrill that comes that just can't be beat. As well as having the retirement funded that you say, hey, we can make it. You know, we're going to be good. I think for a lot of people, just you said credit cards are hard to get rid of. You know, when those are gone, it is like a noose being released from your neck or a chain from your ankle or however you want to picture it. It's just, yes, a cloud is lifted. So number 2 could be an exciting one. It's one that, well, you don't necessarily reach in a couple months, but that's a great attainment. So and I think we've kind of touched on this. Why go through these steps at all? Again, it's to put your family on a solid footing. You can share it with others, especially our young people, but it's not just young people. I've run into plenty of people who, I had a question at the beginning. If we'd had more time, we would have touched base on, you know, who were your mentors when you grew up financially? And for many people, I've worked with businessmen, medical people, etc., that said we had no direction financially. What we've learned through lots of losses or mistakes or whatever. You and I have the chance of coming alongside people who are, you know, young people or people in difficulty who may be open to something, and we can help them move right on down to that thrilling stage 7. Not that we want to hold off till 7. We want to be giving along the way, but there's something thrilling about hitting that last milestone where you can be even freer in making a kingdom impact. Any questions? We've hit all 7 of our key destinations. Any questions?
I don't know how to ask this as a question, but personally, I feel that life is sort of like running a marathon. And so it takes a lot of thinking. You got to really, you really got to know what you're doing. But the end goal is, when you cross that finish line, you better have used up all your energy. And so my thinking is, when I'm ready to die, all my money had already been taken care of in the Lord's work one way or another. I don't want to have to worry about who's going to get what's left. Great imagery and a great picture. And, you know, I'd be right with you 100% if I could just get the tip on when I was going to die. But until then, we're still striving for the same goal. Give as much as you can now. Be generous, even more generous as we can. I just haven't figured out the timing. I haven't given, everything's not gone yet. You know, I'm well taken care of, even though I skipped a whole lot of those things. I didn't follow your rules, but I learned very, very early to pay off the house quickly, which you mentioned that. Yeah, we paid double, triple payments to get rid of it, bang. and then save up so that the next house we pay cash. We don't have any interest. And so that's the way we've been working things. And so everything's paid off. We have no bills, basically. My goal was at one point, that was a few years back, to be able to live on $300 a month. And we had gardens and greenhouses. We did all our own auto mechanics, everything. But then, and actually, well, I'll tell you too many things, but actually, I actually resigned from working for the government. They paid me $25,000 to resign, okay? So I resigned, and we lived off the property, and we did that for many years. And then, 5 years, okay. And then, well, I had to be gone for 5 years, because if I came back, I would have to pay that $25,000 back. But actually, I only got $17,000 because taxes took the rest. Okay, so hey, I didn't want to pay 25. Okay, but as soon as that 5 years was up, I came through Spokane here and stopped at Bell Substation to see my old engineer buddies, and they go, "Hey, man, how would you like to come back to work?" I'm like, "Whoa," you know. And my wife says, "Yeah, the barrel's getting a little empty. It's time to." Okay, so they actually paid me $10,000 to come back, and they gave me. Yeah, it was incredible. I couldn't.
They needed engineers then.
They had too many engineers before. They were trying to downsize, and now that they needed some, and especially some that knew what was going on. So hey, they wanted me back on there. Anyway, it's been going like that, back and forth. The Lord has really been good. That's the only thing. But the main thing for us was get ahead, stay ahead, and buy everything with cash. I mean, your cars, whatever. You just save tons of money if you don't play their games.
Well, thank you. And yes, if you grab the mantra to stay out of debt or dramatically reduce debt, to me there's probably two things that are worth going in debt for. One is a home. I mean, right now you can't walk into Spokane and buy, especially starting out. There's just no way. And number two, an education. You know, you're not buying a depreciating asset. Depreciating assets are the last thing you want to buy with debt. So it's going up while the value of what you bought is going down. Education can't ever be taken away from you. A home typically will appreciate, not like the runaway stuff we're seeing right now, but on average it will appreciate. But, you know, if a person avoids debt, you can pretty much skip most of this. That just goes a long ways. But God has been good to you, and God is interested in this aspect of our lives. It's not just sitting in the pews and worshiping Him on Sabbath. He's interested in how we can make a difference. And you shared how He's been good to you. Yes, God is great. Well, thank you very much for spending this time together. And tomorrow night, we'll be taking a look at family finances and how do we drive that with our vision of where we want to go versus debt or whatever pushing us, which you've already commented on. Let's go ahead and bow our heads for prayer. Heavenly Father, thank you for taking a personal interest in each one of us in all areas of our life. Thank you for entrusting us with the means that we can take care of our family and we can make a kingdom difference at the same time. Please be with us as we head home. Guide us and bring us back tomorrow night and bring anyone else who could benefit by spending this time together. In Jesus' name, amen.